Chris is, let's see, she's a retired yoga teacher. She is the founder of a wonderful learning platform called Embodied Biotensegrity. It's an online platform for movement professionals, manual therapists, and body geeks who get to learn all these wonderful things about the new science of biotensegrity. Hi, Chris. Is there anything that I left out of this intro?
Well, first, Elizabeth, I want to say hi to you and to all your people and say how happy I am to be here with you today. I would add one of the great things about the Embodied Biotensegrity community is we're truly a hierarchical, a collaborative learning community. So it's, to me, a really special place because everybody's voice matters and it's not top down so much. As you know, because you're a part of this community, we sit side by side, in metaphorically anyways, with people who are brand new to biotensegrity and people who are writing the books like Graham Scarr and Susan Lowell de Solorzano. And our conversations are generally really, really rich because of that.
You know, I think that being a part of your group was one of the best things for me about the pandemic. I got to learn this amazing science, from a very hands-on kind of sticky perspective, and the access that you gave us to these people who are really trailblazers in the field was like nothing else. It's very, very exciting.
I find it very special. And I want to add, Elizabeth, then in addition, you and people like you are coming and you're bringing your own perspective. And together, this melange of people and experience and expertise is super exciting. And it's what brings biotensegrity forward.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, when I first entered, it was a brave new world. There's a lot to learn. It's a whole different, it's an upside down world from what I had learned from my years and years working in the movement world, exercise science and all of that. It's a totally different and fresh and just so sensible approach. It's kind of like when you learn it, you think, oh, of course, I always knew that. I just believed another lie that was never really felt right on my body. And what happens is that the more you get involved, the more you read, the more you get to talk to these people, eventually people start creating innovations, new movement practices, new ways of looking at it. So it really is a hierarchical community in that way. And that's also why I think it's incredibly exciting.
Well, yes, and people are taking what they learn and they're innovating. And also people who have already been innovators all their lives stumble across biotensegrity. And it's like, oh, this explains what I've been feeling in my body.
Oh, yeah.
So it happens in all directions. And as we often talk about, living beings are nonlinear systems. Life is a process. It's an embodiment process, always changing, and not step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4.
Right. There's always this change, this element of unpredictability, leaving that little opening for the surprise, the mystery. Because we can't, that's the other thing I've learned about it. We can't know everything. There's the arrogance of thinking that we know how the body works and we know how an injury happens and how a body is going to adapt to it is really foolish. And when we take a softer approach and are responsive to the living body, then we have a much better guide. One of the things that I was really amazed at is that learning biotensegrity helped me to feel connected to all of life.
Yeah. I had one of my yoga students say to me, and other people have echoed this. She says, biotensegrity, it changes everything.
It does.
And, from my perspective, I talk a lot about the cultural lens through which we live our lives, because there's also discussions about biotensegrity, the science, and you could take it a lot of different places. I'm a member of the Stephen M. Levin Biotensegrity Archive. I'm a board member. So I really like to try and share Steve, I might call him, his perspective. And that is the archive, we're trying to forward biotensegrity as a science. And yet being a yogi and a child of wonder and awe and nature, I live also a very inner spiritual life. And so I talk about it as shifting paradigms. When we change that cultural lens of our understanding of the body, it does change everything. It's a paradigm shift, because we no longer want to consider this as a machine. We no longer want to constrain ourselves within hierarchical relationships and always be putting ourselves above or below. It just doesn't make sense. And just to touch in on what you were talking about, really listening to the body with our conventional Western lens and this body as a machine model, we have very much an attitude of fix it. I can understand what's going on and I can fix it if only I am smart enough.
Right. Yeah.
But what you are doing with your work, what we're talking about in some of our meetings, is that with this paradigm shift becomes a shift in the way that we consider our relationships to ourselves, our bodies, each other. So it becomes, instead of fix it, a dialogue. Our practice is as much a practice, or perhaps even starts with, in my opinion, but different people will come at it from different ways and bring their own expertise. But there is that essential aspect of presence and inner listening. So I can see, hear, or feel what's happening in here.
Yeah.
And that, it can be risky. It means we have to do a little bit of letting go of control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not taught to enjoy that.
Well,
I love it.
we agree.
You can enjoy it. You can learn to enjoy it. It becomes a playground.
Well, it becomes an addiction. The control piece. Take it from one who's been there. But also with this idea of I can fix it. I alone can fix it.
And if I can't, I'll go to somebody who can fix it for me.
Right. It presumes that there is something wrong, and not just wrong like my shoulder's hurting now, but fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
That there's something that needs to be changed or fixed, and people can come with a problem. We can have an issue that we need to address, and we should, and we can successfully do that. But I think one of the big shifts is coming from this different places. There's this idea of needing to be fixed is temporal. It's in this time and place. It comes from a culture that birthed the biomechanical body in the first place. Mm-hmm. And before that is this other fundamental truth that still is true, always has been true, always will be true. And that is we are whole. We are already whole. And we are already deeply connected to the resource of the regenerative energy that we seek to heal us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something that is woven right into biotensegrity.
Yeah.
It's woven into the concept, one of wholeness.
Yeah.
And one of wholeness. And also Graham Scarr has a paper about, I think it's called Biotensegrity, Health and disease. I actually apologize. Sorry, Graham. I can't remember the name of it, but we've spoken about it. You were probably there about you don't fix your biotensegrity.
Oh,
The body is,
yes.
always operating in the most efficient way possible, given the current constraints, given the moment to moment to moment happenings in the body or the forces in the body. So the body's always doing the best it can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we might feel uncomfortable. And what we can do as practitioners is welcome or invite an environment where a new best it can or a new efficient state will emerge. But with that shift comes exactly what you're talking about. And that is, I'm not broken.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not less than. My body is this miracle that's doing the best it can, despite the fact that whatever's happened.
You can't walk or you can't lift your arm. Your body is still doing the best it can. And one of the things that I love so much about working with this medium of the fascia,
Mm-hmm.
the collagen matrix, which is really, I think it needs another name. It's like almost a disservice.
Yeah.
Achman calls it the collagen consciousness.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, James Achman.
James Oshman.
Yes, Oshman. He's a brilliant
I
thinker.
had lunch with him once.
Oh my God.
I'll tell you that story some other time.
Tell me another time. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that working with that living medium, then when you are addressing an issue like your knee's hurting or you can't lift your arm over your head, you're speaking to an emergent quality of that tissue itself, which is this teleos, this desire to evolve into a better form, to adapt into a new modeling of a more efficient system. It wants to go there. It's kind of built in.
Yeah. Yeah. If only we can get out of the way.
If only.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, let me just use this as a jumping off point for then going to this idea of how we are evolving our practices to stay healthy. Because that's certainly another thing that we've learned. A lot of the stuff that we were doing was contributing to the problems that our bodies were not feeling good from it.
Well, but we've both spent time in the Ashtanga yoga lineage, have we not?
Yes.
Yeah. That was very much in my young years where it was about getting the pose.
Oh, yeah.
And do you remember those? Did you teach in Ashtanga as well?
I did not teach Ashtanga. No, I taught vinyasa.
Okay, I did. And we were taught in our first training, like the adjustments we were taught were quite extreme.
Yeah. I came from extreme adjustment lineage as well. Today I look back on it and I find it abusive.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't know any better. But
we didn't know any better. I mean, but I came from fitness, I have to say. And before I got into yoga, taught fitness for many years and all different kinds. And certainly the type of fitness teaching, the corrections were much more cautious, much more informed. And when I was really shocked when I got to the yoga world, and it was kind of like, oh, we don't care about that. Oh, put your head down below your legs after in a forward bend after doing a really intense vinyasa sequence of 100 different sun salutations. And then put your head below your legs. The Valsava maneuver, which we were taught in the fitness world, You could faint if you put your head down after that quickly after that kind of exertion. Nobody cared because there was a lineage. There was the precedent of this spiritual practice that you couldn't question. So we would just go ahead and do this stuff anyway.
Yeah. And I would say that certainly in my experience, I don't think it was that people didn't care. I think that what it was that the value system was different.
Yes.
So they, so I do, and I know you agree, I do believe that people do care and they want what's best. But if there's no questioning of that value system, and especially given that two things. One, we come from a society where we're taught that there's right and wrong and good and bad and hierarchy. And two, a lot of us are looking then to be guided, we're told how to get there and check off all the right boxes.
That there is a path, a linear.
That it's very easy to fall into that.
Yeah.
And we know what's happened, what's happened, and so many abuses have been revealed. I was lucky though. There's a woman in Vancouver who, her name is Joya Irwin, and she was teaching in the Vijnana yoga lineage, which in leaving Ashtanga and moving to the Vijnana lineage, suddenly I was in a somatic based practice. Vijnana yoga is practicing, what is it? Practicing from inside, listening, practicing from inside. And although the practice itself is based on Iyengar's practice, so it can be quite challenging. The principles are based on quiet mind and relaxed body and intent and connecting. So in my time of teaching and yoga teacher training, when I was training teachers, you could look on the internet and there were a lot of images of people in extreme back bends and their rib cage would be pressing out, and kind of like a collapsed tensegrity where their rib cage would be pushing out, the head is like this, and there's all this congestion at the back. And we didn't practice that way. We had this principle of connecting that was really playing with the balance of push and pull, tension and compression, to encourage, to cultivate that space at all the joints and the overall balance. So I think that was very good for me, because in Ashtanga, I was putting my feet behind my head in these extreme twists, and I think that my body would have suffered even more than it did. But as I did reach, premenopause and hormones started to change, even with this much more refined practice, my body became like a loose bag of bones, and I was in a lot of pain.
Yes, I.
Mm-hmm.
That's where mine was too.
Yeah. So, I could go to the osteopath and feel great. And then 6 hours later, I'd do something and my body would slip back into that old minimal energy state, because it didn't have the, I'm just looking, can I grab one of my models?
Yes, please.
I should have pulled them up to have them really close.
Oh, I love that.
This is one I'm just playing with. Now, this one is with elastic bands, so it's a little different than the other ones. But this one, you can see, is quite, it's quite, I can press in, but the there's still space, right? But if I were to take, really loosen up some of the tensional aspect. Now, I'm assuming people out there know about biotensegrity. They're working with you. So I'm not going to explain all the details, but as soon as I loosen up on some of these, I haven't tried this. So didn't realize I was going to be pulling out models. But let's see here. I start to make it really much more slack. You can see this is slack here. And then suddenly, it's doing this.
Yeah.
Now, this is that back bend I was talking about.
Yeah. Ouch.
Right. Where there's a lot of congestion and a floppiness on this side.
Mm-hmm.
And you will see in the body some of the bones popping out. Whereas I'm not going to go through and balance it again, but when the tensional aspects are all even in balance, the space is there even in the movement.
Yes. Yes. And this is something you can feel the change happening as you're doing it.
Yeah.
I've read it takes 6 to 22 months to rebuild the collagen matrix, but this is a change you can feel right away.
Yeah. And perhaps you're not instantaneously rebuilding the collagen matrix, but what you're doing is setting up the conditions for Leonid Bloom calls it the black box. So for those inner dynamics, which are happening on multiple size scales, to find a new minimal energy state, a new way of all of these, I don't even want to say bits and pieces or parts, but a new way of that continuum to orient to each other, to rebalance. And like you say, I remember, teaching in yoga studios, and you know how in a standing forward fold, and people are wearing yoga shirts and the back gets all wrinkly and dimply. And I can remember one woman specifically, I don't even remember her name, just a little bit of rebalancing in the way that she was working with the tips, fingers, toes, with connecting to the whole body and the skin of the back. It took 20 years off of, if she could see side by side those pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as a teacher, you can see it, and you can, that person can feel it in their body, and you can actually feel it resonating in your body. Yes. Because you're tapping into that wider system.
Yes. Yes. In this resonant universe, this fluid wave universe that we live in. And that rebalancing, that's very much like water, finding, you throw a rock in and it finds its balance again. It ripples through the field and returns to some balanced state for the moment till the next thing happens.
That's a beautiful image, and I will probably borrow it from you.
Oh, please.
So I'll be mentioning you saying that. I love that image. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, I agree.
Well, feel free. So, but even though you shifted to this lighter practice, yoga wasn't feeling good on your body. Something was calling you to make a change. Can you talk about that?
Sorry. I was in a lot of pain. my SI would go out. I had sciatica, and then I kept flipping back. I needed more than what I needed, different, because different than those repetitive patterns. And I had a head injury that left me, that really was hard to get over. I was out for 6 months. I was premenopausal at the time, so I wasn't sleeping. So anxiety and things like that. It was a big lesson time, Chris. Listen to your body. And I pulled back, this image of a caterpillar in a cocoon. That was very much where I was. And really, I had no other option than to learn to listen even more deeply than I already had. Back to this Western culture of push, 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 doesn't work when you have a head injury. So it was to the point where really I was sitting around in a dark house all winter. And my one saving grace is I live in a community called Deep Cove. It's up a fjord just outside of Vancouver. And so every day I would take my tea and I would go outside and I would sit, rain or shine. And I started feeding the birds. And that was my moment of connection. I couldn't be on the phone. I couldn't be on computers, or I couldn't even read. Making a meal was a triumph for that day.
Wow.
And, a large part to this inability to sleep, because we need sleep to heal. And I can remember, and you and I, we talked earlier about really listening. And I can remember, so I go to the water and I just wanted to swim. And I hated the cold. Absolutely hated it. Like, I was the type of person that would go outside, and if the air temperature was colder than my skin temperature, I would bundle up. And in fact, I once upon a time even got hives from cold. And not just cold temperatures, but anytime, again, the air was colder than my skin. So although my body longed to be in the water, I just could imagine, I just called me. I wouldn't go in, because I had this image of walking back to my house, which is about a block from the beach, putting on my bathing suit, going and standing, maybe up to my knees if I was lucky, and not being able to go in. And at this point, I really felt a failure. There were days when I tried to, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to walk to the plaza. And instead of walking both ways, I'll take the bus back. And then later in the day, I would just be a mess, and crying, and I'd done too much. And so I was really feeling a failure. And I just didn't take that initiative. I put my feet in every day, and that helped, but it wouldn't keep me calm. And the yoga, I'd be lying up at night, and I would be doing restorative practices or pranayama and practicing yoga nidra every day. And that might help calm my body down for a moment, while I was doing those practices. But it never stuck. And so I wasn't getting what I needed. Yeah. When the summer came and I started swimming, I started getting what I needed. And, so it wasn't cold anymore, but at first it was scary, because I brought my goggles, and I would swim, not just at the beach, but out to the marina and back, which is about 1 kilometer. And I could take 6 strokes of front crawl, and then I'd have to rest. And so first I had this, I loved it, and there was joy, and that I needed that. And yet every time I swam, especially we have lion's mane jellyfish, you know what they are?
Yes.
The big red ones, and they sting.
Yeah.
And as I was swimming, I would go in every day, and there were so many of them. And I know now that usually they're deep, but every time you see one, you get this adrenaline rush. And then you have to calm down. And yet I started to feel stronger. I had joy in my life again. 6 strokes went to 12 strokes, went to 2 docks distance before I needed to rest, and so on and so forth.
That's great.
So I was feeling stronger again. And we need that. My body, in listening, my body led me to where I needed to be. And, people would say, oh, well, how long are you going to swim? Are you going to swim all winter? And I'd say, well, I don't know. I'm going to swim as long as I want to.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to impose, but by this point, I was finally starting to learn. Really listen. Your body will tell you. But I did keep swimming almost every day. And that whole first year, like I say, I hate the cold. Every time I went swimming, I was afraid of the cold. I still am, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole first year, I would go to the bathroom, I would get all my stuff on, and I was hilarious. My friend gave me a pink fuzzy bathrobe. So I'd walk down to the beach in my green Crocs and my pink fuzzy bathrobe. But, my neighbors know me as a bit eccentric, I suppose. And I'd have to, as soon as I left, I'd be like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom again, because I was scared. But what I need. I didn't need to learn to relax.
This is the kicker. Yeah.
I needed those micro doses of stress or fear because my body, just by listening and doing following that longing gave that to me. So then my system, without me even trying, learned to calm itself down, healed the anxiety. And of course, swimming the ocean, it just fills you with love and joy and presence. You can't be thinking, you're just there. So many, on so many levels, it healed me. And, last summer, I swam. Now it was with the tide, and we are in a fjord, so the currents can be really strong. Like I swam 5.5 kilometers.
Wow.
So, and this isn't because I'm like training really hard, like I'm going to do a race. This is because I'm doing what brings me joy.
And you probably didn't even realize that you'd gone that far, right?
Well, I knew where I was going, and we'd done a drop off in one place, but I measured the distance afterwards when I got home.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was further than we'd gone before. The year before we'd gone 5K. But it was just, it's just magical to be in the water.
Now, when you say we, I would imagine that time maybe you're swimming with a group, but you usually swim alone. Am I correct in that?
I most often swim alone. I have a swim buddy that is so funny. The day that I decided to bring my goggles and try swimming with goggles, like I'd always paddled around. I've been swimming in the ocean since my kids were young. They're now, in their late 20s. But I had decided, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And that I would go down to the beach and meditate every day anyways. So that I was going to meditate my pranayama and then see what it was like. And that very day, there was I could see over at the other side of the beach, 3 women came down. 2 of them stayed at the swim beach around the dock, and the other one swam out to the marina and back. Her name is Nancy. And I'm thinking, oh, there's somebody that knows how to swim,
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk to her and maybe she'll train me and teach me. And it was her very first day in the ocean.
My.
So we've become fast friends and we swim together. And, you know enough about me. I'm very excitable. And when anybody they talk, I invite them to come along. So sometimes we have groups, sometimes we swim on their own. Sometimes we swim just a couple of us. And most often I swim alone because I love swimming alone too. It's so peaceful.
Well, I love that you change it up and you're giving yourself different types of experiences, from the co-regulation and experience of swimming in a group, but getting back to this idea of the micro stressors.
Yeah.
It feels to me almost like, okay, well, from one perspective, you could say, well, that makes sense because you're building vagal tone. However, I feel like there's something else at play here as well. Some kind of, and this kind of where I feel like we're edging into the anti-fragility part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I don't have any real question, but I'm kind of feeling into this possibility of, if there's this desire in human consciousness to evolve, and the physical evolution is a big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And is there something in this highly responsive, adaptable part of us, which is this living fascial matrix? Is there a part of this which responds with some kind of like an impulse for creating fascial tone, for restoring the balance that we have spoken about? It's just...
I do not know the answer to that, but what I do know is if we listen and we heed the wisdom of our bodies, that seems to happen. doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know of any research or anything. All I know is that anecdotal experience of really tapping in. And I know you've done your continuum, that you teach continuum, and I play around with that a little bit, mostly on my own. And it really is an incredible practice. And it is a practice of, well, you would know more than I would, obviously, but of just allowing. And what happens every time you stand, you always feel better.
Yeah.
You
You all-
always feel better.
Yeah.
And in my body right now, I mean, it's bizarre what happens. My body is full of convulsions and all sorts of stuff that practicing continuum is something that's happening at home at my house, so I don't disturb anyone. But I get this sense that it is building that resiliency. And I don't really know what's going on, but I'm no longer afraid of it. At one point I was, because it was uncontrollable. I only ever did one session, and then my teacher got sick, so we never even finished, and everybody was moving around in these graceful ways. But when I practice at home, it's sometimes it is, but often it's not graceful. And yet, what I wonder, I don't know what's happening, but what I wonder is that these kind of impulsive, spontaneous jerking, and now it's repetition, almost like tremoring, and it can be quite large. Number one, I suspect that this is happening. It's a release of stored stuff, be that memories, be that physical or energetic, I really don't know.
Mhm.
A release of that, but then also in the repetition of it doesn't feel like work. And yet, that when you use something, you are gaining from that. You need to move in order for the muscles to get stronger. The force needs to be transmitted through the fascial matrix, if you want to call it that, in order for it to become more connected, and for that the way the forces move will determine the way the fibers are laid down.
Yes. Yes.
So I just have to trust that this is making me healthier. And certainly if I look back 6 years, my body's sure a lot happier now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so I think one of the things that we're talking about here is biointelligence. And we don't, I think it's safer to say we don't know what biointelligence is. We're discovering it. As soon as we think we know it, I think we're in trouble. But certainly a big part of it is letting go and falling back, and not trying to control having jerky movements, because there is some image out there of Emily Conrad, the founder of Continuum, for those of you who don't know this, doing this kind of cosmic floaty dance, which is absolutely exquisite and very valid. But she's also had a long life of doing Continuum. And she only moved in that floatier way towards the end.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She did all sorts of movement, and you can't say this is the right way to do it, this is the wrong way to do it. But you also can't say, well, you can do whatever you want, because there could be a case where if you're working with someone and they seem to get into the weeds of not the wave isn't getting stuck. Maybe the movement's getting so repetitive that it loops. And so sometimes there's just a way that you can give them some kind of gentle word, touch, transmission energetically to help them find a way to ground the energy so that there's an electric charge that is intensified just enough for the organic movement of the wave, which is always seeking resolution.
I'm curious to know more about the grounding of that energy. What that might look like, or what that might more about. I'm just curious about that phrase. Just, I mean, I'm talking to you as someone who's wondering for myself, oh, what would that be like in my own body? Am I doing that, or is there more room to explore that?
Well, there's many ways that you can ground the energy. I mean, there's energetic ways that you, if you're standing or sitting, you can connect your feet, your pelvic floor, just with your awareness, to the earth, to the floor, balanced on the four corners of the bottoms of the feet, but not in a way so you're just like assuming it like you're about to do yoga, but you're really sensing into it and feeling, well, can I feel the earth beneath me? Can I feel that energy moving up into my legs and into my pelvic floor? How does that change my breath? What happens if I really look around and take in the horizon around me? And then what about the smaller kinesphere, my own personal space? And can I inhabit that in a way so that I'm aware of the weight of my body? And you do certain things to bring you into really the present moment.
Yeah.
Which is a fluid experience. And you, if you feel like there's a drift away from that, you can just do these very simple things to bring you back here into presence. So that's one. And so a lot of times, like, for instance, let's say somebody was doing a dive and they started doing something and it looked like maybe they were in need of a little help. Something wasn't releasing. There was some pain, some suffering. You can just sit there and be a gentle presence. You can give them some kind of energetic correction, is really what it is. Just to help them. Maybe you put your hands on their feet and you say, sink those feet into the earth. Feel the sand between your toes. Feel the waters of the ocean washing over the tops of your feet. You just start to bring in these kinds of images that they have experienced that then bring them down. Because energetically, when someone starts to move out of the lower chakras, they distort the body, and it's like almost volcanic. That the upper chakras, and depending on who you are and what's closed and what's open, and it's gonna blow in some familiar pattern.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is just bring them down, and eventually breath and pulsation and movement will manifest as a wave of energy that moves through the body.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that wave for sure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Now you've given me some things to play with and explore, which is, thank you. That's always fun. I know for myself, when I find that I'm falling into repetition, it's like somebody taught me, I think it may have been Cheriona. It's just this phrase of what else?
And what else? Yeah.
And that will bring presence and a listening and a waiting, and then something else will happen.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's very interesting. And something that I've touched into and then left and then touched into. And then, right now my main practice is swimming.
Well, I think that this is where we are evolving into, if I could take that leap to say that our culture has been so centered around the mental rational structure and the bias towards the mind over the body. And somehow disciplining and controlling the body, and the body being inherently unclean in the yoga tradition,
Yeah.
and in the Christian tradition, inherently sinful.
Mhm, mhm.
All of that, that is a way that was.
Yeah.
Not to say that it will never be around anymore, but clearly I think we're faced with these kinds of challenges that are asking us to find another way to live with the body, to live with nature, to live with the biotensegral truth that we're all
Mhm.
one, we're all one whole.
Yeah. And we're lucky we live in a time where we can choose. We can make that choice to,
Yeah.
like you say, live in the wonder of this flesh and blood,
No, I
live
love it.
in the wonder of this being.
Yeah.
And to discover that it is a spiritual connection to do so.
Yes. Yes. A deeply spiritual connection for me and for you. And I'm glad to be able to share that with you. That's such a beautiful way to describe it. Live in the wonder. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So it's a great talk.
It's been so fun. I'm happy to chat with you anytime. Each time we meet, it fills me up.
Yeah, me too.
So thank
Okay,
you.
my dear. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.